Anna stumbled out of the house, her trembling hands clutching her thin coat tightly against her chest. The door slammed behind her with a hollow thud, its echo swallowed by the icy silence of the night. Her breath emerged in rapid puffs, mingling with the cold air like fleeting ghosts, but she had no time to stop, no moment to gather herself. The sharp wind whipped around her, slicing through the thin fabric of her coat and stinging her cheeks, carrying with it the scent of frost and damp earth. She barely noticed. Her feet moved instinctively, driven by an urgency she couldn't quite name but felt in every fiber of her being. Step after step, they carried her across the uneven ground, the crunch of frozen grass beneath her soles a rhythmic reminder that she was still moving, still fleeing. Darkness cloaked the world around her, swallowing the familiar shapes of the fields and transforming them into an ominous sea of shadows. She felt small, insignificant, but she pressed forward, heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. Ahead, the barn loomed, its weathered silhouette a stark contrast against the starless sky. The vast fields surrounding her stretched endlessly, an expanse of inky blackness broken only by the faint, flickering glow of the lantern hanging outside the barn door. The light was weak, unsteady, but it called to her, a beacon in the void. She fixed her gaze on it, her sole anchor in the suffocating darkness. Her legs burned with effort as she climbed the small hill leading to the barn. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, but she refused to yield. Inside the barn was safety, sanctuary, even if only for a fleeting moment. She could almost feel the warmth of the lantern's glow against her skin, a feeble promise that the cold might loosen its grip on her just a little. The wind howled louder now, as though it sensed her desperation and sought to keep her back. It pulled at her hair, her coat, her very resolve, but she gritted her teeth and pushed forward. Memories flashed through her mind, snatches of voices raised in anger, of tears, of a door slamming. She shook her head, as if to rid herself of the thoughts, but they lingered, haunting her like shadows she couldn't escape. Finally, she reached the barn door. The wood was rough. Beneath her fingers, splinters digging into her palm as she grasped the handle. She hesitated, her chest rising and falling with the weight of her breaths. For a brief moment, she turned back, her eyes scanning the path she had taken. The house was no longer visible, swallowed entirely by the night, and with it, everything she had left behind. Anna pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. Warmth, faint but present, greeted her as she stepped inside, mingling with the earthy scent of hay and wood. The barn was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the beams as the wind battered its walls. The lantern's light cast long, flickering shadows across the hay-strewn floor, creating an illusion of movement that made her heart skip a beat. She closed the door behind her, leaning against it for support. The weight of her escape settled heavily on her shoulders, but for the first time that night, she allowed herself a single, trembling breath of relief. She was here. She was safe. At least for now. As she approached, Anna halted in front of the heavy wooden door. Her heart thundered so fiercely it felt as though it might burst from her chest. Each breath she took was shallow, her throat tight with anticipation. The moonlight spilled across the barnyard, casting long shadows that danced on the frost-covered ground. She could hear the faint, deliberate shuffle of hooves from within, the sound reverberating through the stillness of the night. It was as though Stellin, her horse, was waiting for her, or perhaps he already knew she was coming. The idea sent a shiver down her spine, a mix of wonder and trepidation. Anna hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached for the iron handle. Memories of the last time she had seen Stellin flooded her mind, his coat glistening like polished onyx in the sunlight, the warmth of his breath against her palm as he nuzzled her for a treat. Tonight, everything felt different. The barn loomed before her like a sentinel, guarding a secret she wasn't sure she was ready to uncover. The creak of the hinges split the silence, a sound both familiar and startling in the quiet night. She pushed the door open slowly, the dim light from a single hanging lantern spilling out and stretching into the darkness. The scent of the barn hit her immediately: dry hay, the earthy musk of animals, and the faint tang of leather. It was a scent that carried both comfort and nostalgia, grounding her in the present even as her thoughts raced. Her eyes adjusted to the soft glow, and there he was, Stellin. His tall, majestic silhouette stood out against the backdrop of stacked bales and wooden beams. The light danced across his sleek coat, emphasizing the powerful contours of his frame. His ears flicked forward, and his head turned toward her with deliberate grace. For a moment, neither of them moved. His deep black eyes locked onto hers, steady and unblinking, as if he could see straight into her soul. The connection was immediate, palpable. Anna's breath caught in her throat, her chest tightening with a swell of emotion she couldn't name. She took a tentative step forward, the soles of her boots crunching against the straw-covered floor. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet, yet Stellin didn't flinch. Instead, he stood firm, his gaze unwavering. The air inside the barn felt heavy, almost sacred, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Anna could feel the weight of it pressing down on her, not oppressive, but anchoring, grounding her. In the moment, "You were waiting for me, weren't you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hammering of her heart. The words felt strange as they left her lips, as though they weren't entirely her own. And yet, they carried an undeniable truth. Stellin shifted slightly, his powerful neck arching as he took a single step forward, closing the distance between them. His breath puffed out in soft clouds, warm and steady, brushing against her outstretched hand. The sensation sent a jolt through her, not of fear, but of recognition. It was as though he was answering her unspoken question, reassuring her with his quiet presence. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, unbidden and unexpected. She wasn't sure why she was crying. Relief, perhaps, or gratitude, or something deeper she couldn't yet name. All she knew was that in this moment, standing before Stellin in the hushed stillness of the barn, she felt seen.
Known.
Anna stepped closer, her fingers brushing against the smooth curve of his neck. His coat was warm beneath her touch, a stark contrast to the chill in the air. She let her hand linger, drawing comfort from the contact. Stellin's ears flicked again, and he nickered softly, a sound so gentle it almost broke her heart. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice cracking. "For leaving. For staying away so long." Her fingers tightened slightly in his mane, as if anchoring herself to him, to this place, to the promise of what lay ahead. Stellin didn't move, didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into her touch, his quiet strength steadying her in a way words never could. In that moment, Anna knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Whatever had brought her here, fate, instinct, or something she couldn't quite define, she was grateful. The barn, the night, Stellin, they were all part of something larger, something she was only beginning to understand. And as she stood there, her hand resting against the horse who had always been more than just a companion, she felt a quiet resolve settle within her. This was only the beginning. Stellin tilted his head, a small, almost imperceptible movement that felt like an answer. It was a gesture so simple, yet laden with an unspoken intimacy that seemed to defy explanation. His gaze, steady and unyielding, held a depth that Anna hadn't encountered in years. It was not just the reflection of her in his deep, dark eyes, but something more, something that reached into the tangled web of her emotions and pulled at threads she had forgotten were there. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt truly seen. It wasn't the fleeting acknowledgement of someone distracted by their own concerns, but a profound recognition of who she was, in all her fractured complexity. The silent creature before her, with his otherworldly calm, seemed to understand every unspoken ache, every scar etched into her spirit. She felt laid bare, yet unjudged, as if Stellin had gazed into her soul and found something worth holding on to. It was a connection Lucas, her husband, had never given her, not in years. Perhaps not ever. The realization hit her like a wave, powerful and destabilizing. A surge of emotions swept through her, an intoxicating blend of comfort and peril. It was as though a dam, carefully constructed over years of neglect and quiet suffering, had burst open within her chest. Memories, desires, and long-buried longings rushed forth, too fast for her to contain. There was relief in their release, but also fear. A fear of what these feelings might demand of her. Anna's hand trembled as she reached out, the motion hesitant, almost tentative. Yet when her fingertips brushed against Stellin's sleek mane, all hesitation vanished. The warmth of his body seemed to seep into her skin, a living current that spread through her like fire in dry grass. The sensation was electric, sending a shiver down her spine and leaving her breathless. She didn't pull away. Her mind raced, struggling to make sense of the moment, but her heart had already decided. In that fleeting touch, in the visceral connection that sparked between them, Anna felt something she hadn't realized she had been missing, a sense of belonging. It was a tether, fragile yet unbreakable, anchoring her to a truth she could neither ignore nor deny. And then it struck her, with startling clarity and a tinge of dread, that her life was no longer hers to navigate as it once was. The choices she thought she had, the carefully maintained facade she had constructed, now felt irrelevant. Something had shifted, irrevocably. This silent creature had not only seen her, but had awakened a part of her that she thought had been extinguished long ago. Her life had already begun to change in ways she could neither control nor reverse. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, but for the first time in years, she felt alive enough to walk it. The barn, a sanctuary of stillness, cocooned Anna in a way nothing else could. Outside its weathered walls lay the cold, silent house, a shell of what had once been home. There, Lucas moved like a ghost, his distracted, vacant stares speaking louder than words. The loneliness she felt had taken root long ago, creeping into her soul and hollowing her out year by year. Here, however, in this space of hay-dusted beams and the steady rhythm of Stellin's breaths, she could almost forget. Almost. She closed her eyes and drew in a deep, deliberate breath. The air was rich with the mingling scents of hay, damp earth, and the musky warmth of Stellin's coat. The smell wrapped around her like an old, familiar embrace. Memories broke through the surface, relentless and aching. There had been a time when love felt infinite. A time when she and Lucas would talk for hours, sharing wild dreams and tender secrets under the canopy of starry skies. His charm had been irresistible, his quick wit an endless source of laughter. She could still remember how his jokes made her laugh so hard she'd cry, how his warmth made her believe anything was possible as long as they were together. They had painted their future in broad, hopeful strokes, a life of adventures, quiet evenings by the fire, promises whispered with sincerity that felt unbreakable. But the years had been unkind. Those bright dreams dulled under the weight of routine, their vibrant colors fading to gray. Lucas's work became an all-consuming force, leaving little room for the man she had fallen in love with. It wasn't that Lucas was unkind or cruel. He didn't lash out, didn't betray her trust. But his absence was palpable, an invisible weight that filled every corner of their home. The dinners she prepared grew cold, untouched as his phone calls stretched into the night. Their conversations, once brimming with life, dwindled to polite exchanges as the glow of his screen replaced the warmth of his gaze. When Lucas brought Stellin home, Anna had thought it was just another one of his passing obsessions. He had a knack for hobbies that began with fervor but fizzled before completion. The vintage car rusting in the garage, the wine collection gathering dust, all reminders of his fleeting attention. Stellin, she assumed, would be the same, a beautiful, spirited creature left to the margins of his interest. But Stellin was different. In his deep, soulful eyes, Anna found something she hadn't realized she was searching for. He became her anchor in a world adrift. Where Lucas's indifference had turned their home into a mausoleum of memories, Stellin offered her quiet companionship. He listened without judgment, his steady presence a balm for her aching heart. The barn had become their refuge, a place where Anna could unravel the tangled threads of her thoughts. With Stellin, she didn't need to explain the emptiness she carried. He seemed to understand in a way Lucas never could. His warmth, his unspoken loyalty, reminded her that there was still something worth holding on to. In the silence of the barn, as Stellin nudged her hand gently, Anna felt a flicker of clarity. She wasn't sure if it was strength or resignation, but something shifted within her. Love, she realized, wasn't always enough to heal the wounds time had etched. And yet, perhaps, in this sanctuary of stillness, she could begin to find her own way forward. It wasn't just Stellin who had unraveled Anna's tightly bound emotions. Evelyn, the horse trainer Lucas had brought into their lives, had become an unexpected force of clarity. Evelyn was a quiet, enigmatic woman with an air of stillness that made the world seem louder around her. Her sharp, piercing eyes held a knowingness that Anna found both disarming and infuriating, as though Evelyn could see straight into the corners of Anna's heart she herself tried so hard to ignore. Her words weren't many, but they carried a weight that lingered, each one a pebble dropped into the deep waters of Anna's consciousness. Horses like Stellin, Evelyn had remarked one cool autumn afternoon as they watched him graze under the golden light, don't just sense emotions. They mirror the truths we bury. Sometimes, it's loneliness that binds us closer than love ever could. Anna had responded with a polite smile, masking the unease those words stirred. At the time, she had been convinced Evelyn was simply projecting, that those deep, steady words weren't meant for her but for the trainer's own demons. But the truth had a way of unfolding slowly, creeping into Anna's thoughts when she least expected it. Now, as she stood in the stillness of the stables, her hand resting on Stellin's warm, powerful neck, Evelyn's words returned like a melody she couldn't forget. She thought of how her days had become a series of silent battles, against expectations, against herself, against the ache she felt but couldn't name. Stellin had seen it all, his deep, knowing eyes following her with an almost human understanding. Maybe Evelyn was right. Maybe it was loneliness that had brought her here, step by tentative step, until she stood where she did now, unable to pretend anymore. You know, Stellin, Anna murmured, her voice trembling like a leaf caught in a breeze. Sometimes I wish I could be like you.
Free.
Just running, no walls, no battles, no expectations. Her words fell into the quiet, but Stellin didn't flinch. He turned his head slightly, his soft, velvet nose brushing her arm, as if to say, I know. The weight of that silent understanding unraveled something inside her. She closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the moment. Maybe Evelyn was more than a horse trainer. Maybe she was a messenger, someone who had come into Anna's life to remind her that the bonds she sought didn't start with others. They started here, with herself. Stellin shifted his weight, his muscles rippling under her hand, and Anna felt a strange kind of freedom stir in her chest. It wasn't the kind she had imagined, wild, unburdened, untethered. It was quieter, more profound. It was the freedom of being seen, even by a creature who couldn't speak. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible, though she wasn't sure who she was thanking, Stellin, Evelyn, or perhaps herself for finally standing still long enough to feel. As she turned to leave the stable, Evelyn stood in the doorway, her arms crossed loosely, watching with that quiet knowingness. Anna met her gaze for the first time without flinching, without the need to put up her guard. And in Evelyn's sharp, piercing eyes, she saw something she hadn't before. Understanding. You're learning, Evelyn said simply, her voice like the steady rhythm of hoofbeats in the distance. Anna didn't answer.
She didn't need to.
The bond she had been searching for, she realized, had always been there, between her, Stellin, Evelyn, and the truths she was finally learning to face.
Stellin's gaze
remained fixed on her, steady and unyielding, but somehow brimming with understanding. Anna felt a fleeting sense of relief in his presence, a quiet solace that momentarily dulled the sharp edges of her frayed spirit. For a brief second, she allowed herself to believe that this was enough, that perhaps someone or something understood her in a way no one else could. But the moment shattered like glass against stone. A faint noise, a creak, subtle but intrusive, cut through the stillness. It was sharp enough to snap her out of her thoughts, sharp enough to send her heart lurching. She turned instinctively, her breath catching in her throat as her eyes found the barn door, now slightly ajar. The cold light of the moon cast an eerie glow through the opening, and there, silhouetted in its frame, stood Evelyn. Evelyn's sharp eyes surveyed the scene, lingering on the trembling fingers Anna had pressed against Stellin's mane. Her presence filled the barn like a sudden gust of icy wind. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she let her gaze do the talking, piercing through Anna's carefully constructed walls as though they were made of brittle paper. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, deliberate, but with an edge as sharp as a blade. "Anna," she began, her tone betraying no emotion but cutting nonetheless. "What do you think you're doing?" Anna stumbled back, her hand falling from Stellin's mane as if the contact itself had scorched her. Words twisted and tangled in her throat, a chaotic mess of guilt and desperation. The weight of Evelyn's question was too much, yet the silence that stretched between them felt even heavier. I don't know," she stammered at last, her voice fragile, barely audible. It felt like the truth, and yet it was a lie, a weak attempt to shield herself from the inevitable storm brewing in Evelyn's eyes. Evelyn stepped into the barn, her boots landing with a deliberate finality against the wooden floor. Each step felt like a countdown, measured and unrelenting. When she stopped, she was close enough that Anna could see the faint lines of weariness etched into her face, but they did nothing to soften the intensity of her gaze. "Do you understand where this is heading?" Evelyn asked, her voice low but laden with unyielding authority. The words didn't feel like a question. They felt like a judgment. "You're playing with fire, Anna. And once it burns, there's no going back." Anna's knees weakened as the weight of Evelyn's words pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She wanted to defend herself, to explain the pull she felt toward Stellin, the way his presence grounded her in a way nothing else could. But the words never came. The barn seemed to close in around her, the silence between them thick and suffocating. Stellin shifted beside her, a subtle reminder of his presence, but even that comfort felt distant now. Anna began, her voice breaking like fragile glass, but Evelyn didn't give her the chance to finish. "Don't," Evelyn interrupted, her tone firm but not unkind. There was something beneath the steel, a flicker of something softer, something almost like concern. "This isn't just about you, Anna. Every decision you make from here will ripple outward. Think about what's at stake before you take another step." Anna's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she nodded, the weight of Evelyn's warning sinking deep into her chest. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing. The fire Evelyn spoke of was closer than she'd ever realized, and the choice to step away or be consumed was hers alone. Evelyn's words hung in the air, dense and unyielding, like the humidity before a storm. Anna could feel the truth of them seeping into the cracks of her defenses, each syllable a reminder of the perilous path she had chosen. Yet, even as Evelyn's gaze seemed to strip away her pretenses, Anna felt a defiant part of herself coil tightly around her fragile solace, the one place in this chaotic world where she still felt tethered. Stellin. How could she let go? That connection, however tenuous, had become her anchor, her refuge. But even now, as she clung to the threads of that bond, Anna knew deep down that it was slipping away. Slowly, inevitably, as if fate itself had begun to unravel it before her eyes. The distant rumble of a car engine broke through her thoughts like a sharp crack in the stillness. The sound grew louder, its rhythm steady, almost ominous, until the vehicle appeared, a sleek, dark silhouette against the night. Headlights carved sharp lines across the barn walls, cutting through the shadows and painting everything in stark, unforgiving relief. Anna's heart lurched. She could feel its erratic rhythm pounding in her chest, echoing the conflict within her. Fight or flight? Stand or surrender? Evelyn shifted slightly, her expression softening. Not with sympathy, but with understanding. The kind that came from weathering storms of her own. Her voice, though quiet, carried the weight of inevitability. "This is your moment, Anna," she said, each word deliberate, like a stone placed carefully in a foundation. "Decide. Face it or keep running. But know this, there's no escaping the truth forever." Anna's breath caught as the car came to a halt, its engine idling with a low, guttural hum. The driver didn't step out, but the presence of the vehicle alone felt like a verdict waiting to be delivered. She glanced at Evelyn, whose calm composure seemed almost infuriating. Did she not understand how heavy the choice was? Or perhaps Evelyn knew exactly how suffocating it felt and had simply made her peace with it long ago. Anna turned her gaze back to the car, the darkness beyond its windows an unsettling mirror to her own uncertainty. She thought of everything she had left behind, everything she had fought to hold on to, and everything she was still afraid to face. "You say there's no escape," Anna murmured, her voice barely audible over the steady hum of the engine. "But what if I'm not ready to face it? What if? I don't know how." Evelyn stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on Anna's shoulder. "No one is ever truly ready," she replied, her tone softer now, almost kind. "But readiness doesn't matter as much as the choice itself. The truth is, the longer you wait, the harder it gets. Sometimes, the only way forward is to step into the unknown and trust yourself to weather the storm." The words resonated, not because they offered comfort, but because they carried a stark, undeniable reality. The sound of the car door creaking open drew Anna's attention. A shadow emerged, stepping into the harsh glare of the headlights. Her breath hitched as she recognized the figure. This was it. The crossroads she had feared, yet somehow always known she would face. Her palms were clammy, her pulse quickened, but as she stood there, caught between Evelyn's unwavering presence and the looming figure by the car, something shifted within her. The weight of fear began to ebb, replaced by something else. Resolve. Fragile but growing. Anna took a deep breath, her gaze steadying as she met Evelyn's eyes one last time. "I'll face it," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "But not because I'm ready. Because I have to." Evelyn smiled faintly, stepping aside to let Anna pass. "That's all it takes," she said. And as Anna walked toward the light, the barn door creaked open behind her, revealing a horizon she had yet to conquer. As Lucas stepped out of the car, the door closed behind him with a low thud that echoed in the still night. His shadow stretched impossibly long under the harsh glare of the headlights, cutting through the dark like a blade. Anna's breath hitched. Their eyes met across the uneven gravel, and in that suspended moment, the world seemed to hold its breath with her. She knew Lucas could sense it. The fracture, the unspoken tension hanging in the air like a storm about to break. "Anna," he called, his voice calm, measured, but edged with something sharp. It wasn't anger, not yet, but it carried the weight of expectation. The sound of her name made her flinch, though she tried to hide it. Her fingers tightened around the hem of her jacket, her knuckles white under the dim light. She couldn't look at him, not yet. Instead, she turned to Evelyn, standing just behind her. Evelyn's eyes, always steady, always piercing, locked onto hers. In their depths was a challenge, unspoken but unmistakable. "What will you do now? Will you stand, or will you fall?" Anna's chest tightened. She didn't want to look at Stellin, but the pull of his presence was magnetic, inevitable. When her gaze finally found him, he didn't flinch, didn't waver. His dark eyes reflected something heavier, something raw, like the weight of all her turmoil mirrored back at her. In that moment, she realized he had always known. Somehow, he had seen the storm building inside her long before she had admitted it to herself. But it wasn't their gaze she needed to face. It wasn't Evelyn's unyielding strength or Stellin's quiet understanding that mattered now. Slowly, she turned back to Lucas, who stood at the threshold of the barn. He didn't move, didn't demand anything from her. He simply waited, his posture taut, his shoulders squared as if bracing for what was to come. The barn loomed behind him, its shadow a dark, yawning void against the flood of headlights. The door hung open, creaking faintly in the wind, an unspoken invitation or a warning. She wasn't sure which. But it didn't matter. This was her moment. Her reckoning. The air around her felt thick, heavy with all the words she hadn't said and the choices she hadn't made. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it might shatter her ribs. The gravel crunched beneath her boots as she took a step forward, and then another. There was no turning back now. The path ahead was unclear, shrouded in shadows and doubt, but it was hers to walk. Anna knew what awaited her wasn't just about Lucas, or Evelyn, or even Stellin. It wasn't about the barn or the secrets it held. It wasn't about loyalty or betrayal or love, not entirely. It was about her, about finding the strength to face herself, to confront the chaos and the fear that had been clawing at her for so long. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it. Not for them, but for herself.